My name's Jill Gallagher. I'm a Gunditj Mara woman from Western Victoria, and I'm also the current CEO of the Victorian Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation, and in short that's VACCHO. We have been involved as a peak body for Aboriginal health in the state of Victoria. We've been involved insofar as the document has evolved over time in making comments. But what we also were able to do is allow for our members to have an input into it. So a couple of members were actually chosen through that engagement process to actually be the, what do you call it, not the guinea pigs. So whenever there was a draft of the Koolin Balit, VACCHO would make our comments, but would also send it out to a handful of our members for their comments, and they provided that directly to the department. And that was very strategically done, and it was done on the advice of VACCHO, the best way to get our involvement, but also the members that we advocate for. So then it became a document that this current state government's policy on Aboriginal health and how they're going to tackle it. And then there was a big launch, which the current minister launched, and then the challenge was actually the development of an implementation plan. Now, without being too critical, we were sort of involved in that, but not to the level that VACCHO would have liked. But I think there was a lot of factors playing in that space. You know, the transition from a government that started the process to a new state government, and also personnel changeover within the department. So they do have an implementation plan, and it is a 10-year plan. And at the state government level, there has been a financial commitment by this government, which is really good, but there's still a long way to go. There is an implementation plan at the moment, but it hasn't been signed off. Okay. So it's still waiting on the minister to sign off on. So the big, and at the moment I know the department are currently working individually with our members around the regional priorities within the Koolin Balit. So all our members have been working with their regional departments to look at what are the priorities as outlined for them, as outlined using the Koolin Balit strategic plan as a framework to do that. So the members have actually started with their regional action plans, which then get sent into the department. Unfortunately, VACCHO's not in that space. Okay. It's what they call a bottom-up approach, which VACCHO, in accordance to our principles, don't have a problem with the bottom-up approach. But what we're not seeing a lot of is what are the statewide initiatives that we need to be looking at in relation to the implementation of the Koolin Balit. I think so. I mean, governments, and I mean, it's not a criticism, but governments do have their own priorities, which sometimes doesn't meet community priorities. But how do you get a common ground that we can look at developing, you know, along the same lines, or how can we look at developing that common ground with community and government in relation to identifying what are the local priorities, and does it fit within the overall strategic framework of the Koolin Balit and their priorities as outlined in the strategy. It really is, and that has been a challenge for a long time. I think that's with any government. How do we, and even VACCHO sometimes struggle with community engagement. We have clearly defined who our members are, so we have 24 full Aboriginal health services based around the state of Victoria who are VACCHO members. So it's pretty clear who we engage with What's not clear for us is, are our members engaging with their, as I put it, Aboriginal citizens? And so that's different levels of engagement, from government to statewide peak bodies to service delivery agencies on the ground, which are our members. And that engagement is so vital, and it's all about to have that engagement, one, in developing priorities, but also see how we're tracking. It's all around that continuous quality improvement. But community engagement has been a challenge for a long time. How do we get really good community engagement? That's the problem. The VACCHO members, as they are today, the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service was one of our first Aboriginal community controlled health services in this state. And they've been around for 40 odd years. And I don't think I need to go into why Aboriginal health services have evolved. There was a need because mainstream services weren't meeting the needs of our communities for a whole range of reasons. So they're there, and we've grown from 1 to currently 24 full members here in Victoria. But they never started out as Aboriginal health services in the very beginning. It was about Victorian Aboriginal communities having a voice. It was about Victorian Aboriginal communities having an identity, and this is with an Aboriginal organisation at a local level. I mean, you go to somewhere like Bairnsdale or Shepparton, what's visibly Aboriginal there? Not a lot, except for the Aboriginal organisations that visibly are Aboriginal, because you can see the flags fly. So originally that's what organisations started out as, is that self-determination, that identity issue, especially for Victoria. Victoria's history, and I don't think I need to go into a great deal about that, but Victoria's history, well, most of South Eastern Australia's history is about, colonisation was rapid and it was brutal, very brutal. So for I can't quote the figure before contact, how many Aboriginal people lived in Victoria or in these parts of the world, but today we've got 50,000 Aboriginal people in Victoria. Well, they say 48, I think it is. I round off and say 50, Kerry. So we've got 50,000 Aboriginal people that live in Victoria today. And we still have to justify ourselves at a national level that you do have a population, you do have a very strong culture here in Victoria. So that empowerment for us as Aboriginal people is having very vibrant, strong Aboriginal organisations, which empowers Aboriginal people at a local level. We're also one of the biggest employers of Aboriginal people throughout Victoria. When you count up how many Aboriginal people are employed through our networks, I know there are some figures lying around somewhere, but it's enormous. So that empowerment and that sense of ownership and that sense of knowing, we know at a local level, our members know the community, they know the politics, they understand the families, and they understand devastation, the devastation that settlement had on us, and it still has on us today. So that understanding gives them an edge up to deal with how to deliver good services to our people. There's a long history here in Victoria. In the very early days here in Victoria, back in the 70s and 80s, that's what I call early, back in the 70s and 80s, we had our organisations that we now know as the VACCHO members, as the ACCHOs here in Victoria, they also had a different role to play. They were actually named in a piece of legislation that was Commonwealth legislation that only pertained to Victoria. And that piece of legislation was about heritage protection, Victorian Aboriginal heritage protection. So each ACCHO was actually named in the schedule of that piece of legislation as being the responsible organisation to engage with or to consult with when it came to heritage matters. and they had various powers under that piece of legislation that actually gave the co-op powers to issue a permit to developers around disturbing or destroying heritage sites or heritage values in a particular area. Now, as time has gone on, Victoria has evolved to a place where, and native title legislation's now in, and we have new heritage legislation here in Victoria that puts that responsibility back into the hands of what they call the traditional owners, or in Victoria's case, the registered Aboriginal parties, the RAPs in a nutshell. And so they've now been defined and certified, and so they have cultural heritage responsibilities under that piece of legislation. So the VACCHOs today don't have that responsibility around cultural heritage and what that means. But what we do have is a responsibility to ensure that not only are our own services, but also mainstream services are culturally safe. Not culturally aware, culturally safe. There's a big difference. And so over the past 2 to 3 years, we've developed a package here at VACCHO, and it aims at mainstream services, and we do it in partnership with our members. So we've developed a core package, training package, that actually is presented to mainstream services about how they can make their service safe for our people to access. So that's important. But what we want to do, the whole model is not just about VACCHO as the peak body. We charge a fee for service for that too, by the way. But it's not just about VACCHO as the peak body delivering this. It's about how VACCHO does it in partnership with our members. So the module looks at, it's a core module that it's a minimum standard that everyone should have, and then we'll add the local knowledge with a local from one of our members who will co-deliver that. And they will also have a business model around that. So it's about how we develop the capacity of the VACCHOs in throughout Victoria to build their capacity to be the leaders when it comes to cultural safety programs in the health space. So the RAPs and the cultural heritage aspects, their role is around cultural awareness to a whole broad range of the general public, not just to health services, and that's where our space is in. Because we want to assist those health services, Kerry, to make change. So we hope that they take away with them, and we help them to take away with them, a strategy how they're going to make change at the local service delivery level. I think it's fantastic that the new National Health Plan does highlight that in there as an issue that we need to tackle, but I don't think it's our issue to tackle, to put it bluntly. I think we need to advocate the effects that racism has on our health and our communities, as individual people, as families and as our communities. It has a humongous impact on health outcomes for Aboriginal people, the effects of racism. But I don't think we as Aboriginal people can do a lot about it. I think it has to be owned and leadership provided by non-Aboriginal people. They need to come up with strategies around how to address racism. But I think they have to understand the effects it does have on individual people's health. I think partnerships are is one of the ways that's going to help us to close that life expectancy gap or the credibility gap. One or the other. I'm not sure what the difference is. But partnerships are important because we cannot do it on our own, Kerry. Our services, I believe, I can only speak on behalf of Victorian members, our services, I believe, are top notch, They undergo all the accreditations they have to undergo, they provide good quality services, they know their communities, but we cannot meet all the needs of the community by ourselves. So we do need partnerships. We need the specialist services such as, the Australian Heart Foundation, the AMA, Diabetes Australia. You know, you can think of all the partners in help. We do need them to come on board. We have a saying here in Victoria, now I don't know whether it's nationally, but we have a saying, Aboriginal health is our business, but it is everyone's responsibility. We are citizens of this state, we are Victorians, we just happen to be Aboriginal Victorians. So it is everyone's responsibility to help us to close that gap. Now, saying that, I know VACCHO as a peak body, we struggle with all the partners that we've identified as being important to engage in this or be in this space. It's managing those relationships, and it's having, you know, what are the expectations out of those relationships. That's a real challenge, and it is an expensive challenge, unfortunately. I mean, it takes a good bit of my day or time maintaining these partnerships and these relationships and having regular meetings. I often think if I was, say, someone like Rumbalara Aboriginal Co-op, who is based in Shepparton, who's one of our largest, one of the largest VACCHOs here in Victoria, the amount of partnerships that they would need or should have, the lone CEO having to maintain those partnerships and having the relevant, no Aboriginal organisations gets funded for policy development, no Aboriginal organisations get funded to develop relationships and maintain those partnerships. It's all tied into, you know, the work of a CEO. So at a service delivery level, that is really, I know the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service, who are based here in Melbourne, which is a big metropolitan area, they have all these partners who want to do good and want to be involved and want to take responsibility for Aboriginal health, but they need to do it in partnership with VARs. But VARs can't maintain that level of interest. So how do we deal with that? How do we challenge that? One of the things that I learnt out of this, I believe, anyway, we as an organisation learnt out of all the accreditation processes that we have to undertake. I mean, and I'll give you an example, Rumbalara is one of our largest co-ops, and they have at a minimum 19 different accreditation standards that they have to maintain. Now one standard might have 50 sub-standards under there that they have to meet. So the burden of compliance and professionalism, if that's what you want to call it, is great. But one thing I have learnt is that it is important that that we are accountable. By the way, the dollars aren't always enough or what we need to have. So we do have to be accountable. We have to be efficient and look at how we can do business better, and the partnerships help with that. I think governance also plays a big role, Kerry, in being accountable and having really switched on organisations who deliver quality service. It starts at a governance level, and over the years I think the VACCHO sector here in Victoria has evolved to a level that I feel very proud of. But what has happened in the past and is still happening is that governments or community, they see that the answer to that is governance training. And there's a lot of governance training rolled out here at the state level, by the way. I think the state government provides something like $2 million for governance training just in our sector. Now, to us, as VACCHO, in the work that we do with our member services around the board coaching and the risk management and all those areas that we do a lot of work in, what's been identified, you can have a board of 7, and the majority of our boards are boards of 7, and you might have 3 of those board members who've done, the Certificate 3 in governance training and what that means, but they don't know how to apply it. How do you actually apply it in a systems approach in the organisation? And that became very apparent to us through all the work that we're doing, is that because they've undertaken that governance training, and some of them have done Certificate 4 in governance training, and that's a big chunk out. You know, our boards in our organisations are usually volunteers, and they either, you know, the board members either work somewhere else and do this in a voluntary basis. So going to training has always been, you know, especially if you're going to commit 4 weeks of training in doing the Certificate 4, it's a big commitment. But it's important. But what we missed was that how do you apply that in the workplace? So what we do in the workplace is we actually have a team of people here at VACCHO that actually go out and provide that coaching when the board sits as a board. And in that coaching we talk about, you know, what is governance, what are the principles of good governance, how we apply it in a systems approach in your organisation, and then we talk about risk management. What is risk management? And we've been doing a lot of that work, and I think that's one of the things we've learnt about, you know, if we're going to have Aboriginal community controlled health organisations who are going to be really important to the delivery of whatever comes out of the national plan, whatever eventually rolls out of that, then our organisations have got to be the leaders in that field. You know, not only do we have to know our community and deliver good quality services, but we also have to bring mainstream along with us. And you've got to have good governance systems and approaches within your organisation to enable that to happen. In my introduction, I introduced myself as an Aboriginal woman from Western Victoria. My mother is an Aboriginal elder. She's a Gunditjmara elder who is still alive today. She's quite unique, I think, within the Aboriginal community because she's actually 88 years old. And to see, and I was saying to someone the other day, I think my mother, there's only one other Aboriginal Victorian that I know of that is alive today who is older than that. And it's Auntie Alice Young, and she's, I think, in her early 90s. And if I can name out of 50,000, well, probably not 50,000, you know, I mean, there's babies in there too. But if I could name just 2 Victorian Aboriginal people who've lived that long, it's quite sad. So I think I'm very lucky that I've got my mother, and you know, and I hope I've got her until she's in her 90s or 100, you know, living to 100. But that's not very often. A lot of families can say that. That, you know, you see. I mean, I've lost in my own family. I've lost 2 sisters who died well before they were 50. I've lost 2 brothers who have died through drug and alcohol issues. Just this morning I found out there was another young suicide in Mildura. In the past couple of weeks in Mildura, they've had 5 youth suicides. We've got to stop it, you know, and we can only do it by working together. I shouldn't get emotional like that. Yeah, you know, I mean, our communities have been devastated by settlements. And people say, well, why do Aboriginal people want special treatment? And it's not about us as having special treatment. It's about us at least coming up to the same opportunity level that non-Aboriginal people have had for many years. My mum, who is 88, you know, she hasn't got a high, well, she did, by the way. When she was 84, she got a degree in arts. So she got a diploma in arts when she was 84. But, you know, the educational attainment of our people, employment opportunities of our people, I think that's why we've got to work together, and that's why our younger people who are coming up through the education system, they're our future leaders. People before me have laid down some big footprints for me to follow. And I'm hoping my generation will lay down some bigger footprints for the youth tomorrow.
Oh, Jill, thank you so very, very much. You're an incredible woman, very talented, role model for people here in Victoria, but also across the rest of Australia, just because we understand the challenges, all of us, I think, and to have someone who can inspire passion in the generations that you're part of, but also those coming through, it's very, very important and powerful. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, Kerry.